All right, so Jack, thank you so much for being here tonight. I know you want to meet your people out there in a minute. So you're before a large business audience for the most part tonight. What do you want to say to them in terms of why they should vote for you versus Governor Murphy?
First thing I want to say is thank you to NJBIA for its advocacy on behalf of the business community. As governor, I'll become cheerleader in chief for the business community. What I want to tell them is I'm going to do everything in my power to make New Jersey a much more compelling and dynamic place to do business so we can create jobs. It pains me greatly that year after year after year, New Jersey is ranked as one of the worst places in the country to do business. We can't have that. It needs to change.
How about in terms of affordability for the state of New Jersey? Business plays a big part into that.
You bet it does.
How are you going to help with that?
Well, first of all, the way to achieve better affordability in New Jersey is by addressing our property tax crisis. It's one of two crises that paralyzes us fiscally and economically. It's the one tax that touches every individual, whether they own or rent. It's the one tax that touches every business, whether they own or rent. We need a new school funding formula. We need a flatter and more equitable distribution of state aid for schools. That's the first step to lower property taxes, and that will be reflected in my very first budget. I believe we can do that, Bob, without leaving any child or community behind and without adversely affecting the quality of education.
Okay, how about, so we're in the budget season right now, right in the heart of it, almost done. They're talking about property tax relief. Is that enough in your view? Right?
It's temporary. It's not the permanent change that we need. And of course, they're using the unnecessary borrowings to put out all kinds of, even the Star Ledger called election year bribes. Right. We need real change. We need permanent change.
Right. In terms of health insurance for business, that's been a big complaint. We always hear it's too high. Is there anything you can do to address that with the business community?
I think there's a couple things that we can do working in partnership with healthcare providers. First of all, let's give thought to allowing out-of-state providers to compete here in New Jersey. I do believe competition makes us better in all kinds of ways, including making things less expensive. I will tell you that I was on Main Street. I employed 20 to 30 people at a time. I think it ought to be easier for all the small businesses to aggregate their purchasing power. That's really not the case today. Yes, there are some platforms out there, but they're not easy. And I think that should be a way to lower health insurance, particularly for the small employer who really does want to offer health insurance. And I also think that if you're licensed to do business in this state, you ought to have to offer every kind of plan. I will tell you that since the time I sold my last business in 2017, I'm not able to pick out a plan for individuals from every health insurance provider.
Right. In terms of, you said you were a small business owner. What can you tell us about the struggle? I mean, it's hard to run a small business, no matter who the governor is, I think. Do you sympathize with that, the people out there who are small business owners in terms of the challenges in this state?
You bet I do, particularly with a governor like Phil Murphy, who I think has no appreciation for what Main Street means to the overall New Jersey economy. We need to make it easier to start a business. I'd like to see the first $50,000 of business income be tax-free because of what the small business owner does in stimulating the economy when their entrepreneurial spirit leads to the formation of their first business. That would also give them more capital to reinvest. So I'm all about some very significant changes to the tax code, particularly changes that benefit small businesses.
Okay, very good. How about regulatory? That's another thing we hear. NJBIA, our Business Outlook Survey, what we always hear about is regulatory challenges. Can you fix or help that for small business?
Yes, we can. We often hear that New Jersey is not only the most taxed state in the nation, but it's also the most regulatory intensive state in the nation. Right. That's a formula for having an economy that never gets on all cylinders. Right. And so I'm going to do everything possible. Listen, I knew my business. I was in the medical publishing space. Yeah. Here's what I do when I sit down with any business sector. Give me 3 reforms. 3 reforms that don't necessarily screw the consumer and don't hurt our environment. And you'll have me champion those reforms if what it does is makes our economy better and enables your business space to create more jobs. Okay. That's what I'll do at the most granular level. Right. On very broad strokes, I think we should do what Nevada did 10 years ago. Why don't we adopt Delaware's bylaws for corporate governance? We've all heard of the Delaware Corporation. Right. Let's do that here in New Jersey. I've yet to hear a sound argument as to why we shouldn't adopt Delaware's bylaws for corporate governance. Do we or do we not want to make New Jersey the most attractive, dynamic, and compelling place in the nation to do business?
Right. I want to turn to grants and loans. Governor Murphy has put out a lot of grants and loans over the past year due to COVID. Some would question they could have been more timely. Watching from, I guess, the sidelines, for a lack of a better term, Do you think he could have done it quicker? Is there something you would have done differently? And also just looking ahead, how much more financial support would you be able to provide business in New Jersey?
In the very beginning, there was a whole lot we didn't know. But I think we learned fast who the most vulnerable were, how to protect ourselves, and how to keep others safe. I do believe the governor shut down too much for too long. Okay. And then when it came time to offer assistance, it was too hard to get the state programs. Certainly the PPP money that was gained through the banks worked for a lot of small businesses, but a lot of the grant programs that were designed for businesses, landlords, what have you, all throughout the state, what I heard were much too bureaucratic, much too hard, and too little, too late. Yeah. 1 out of 3 small businesses on Main Street have closed their doors forever. Right. These were mom and pop shops that have been in families for decades, 50% of which owned by minorities and women. So I think we should have made it a lot easier.
Okay. So in closing, Jack, you know, we see the polls, you see the polls. They show an uphill climb for you. Why do you think you can win?
There's a pathway here. If you look at the last 40 years, no incumbent Democratic governor has been reelected. Republicans have won 6 of the last 10 elections here in New Jersey, gubernatorial elections. So I have great faith in the people of New Jersey. I'm going to work really hard over the next 5 months to get our message out. I think my vision for the future of New Jersey is very different from Phil Murphy's, and I have great faith in the people of New Jersey. They're going to close that curtain behind them come November. They're going to vote for the person they think is going to best serve their interests and the state interests over the next 4 years.
All right. Well, Jack Ciattarelli, best of luck along the way, and thanks for being here today.
Bob, thank you for the opportunity.